Hello and welcome. Once again, I am Ashok Rajguru, your tutor, and in this video we shall take a quick look at the disorder known as multiple sclerosis. This is a very wide subject, and what you will see in this video has been taken from various sources. I could recommend Khan Academy for the excellent videos and presentations which they have made in case you wish to study this from first principles. The objectives of this video are to understand the etiology and the pathophysiology of the condition known as multiple sclerosis. The etiology, according to modern medical science, of multiple sclerosis is multifactorial, which means there is not any one single reason or cause which can trigger this condition. The most important is the genetic makeup. A lot of research has been done into identifying the genes and the populations which are affected by this. For instance, they have identified one particular gene which has been found in 80% of the people in northern Scotland in a particular region where multiple sclerosis is very common. So genetic disposition is very important. The next thing which is important is the environment. Although this has not been fully understood, but there is statistical data to support the view that the environment has a major impact on the person who may be susceptible because of a genetic makeup. And the third important thing, which is most important, is the fact that even if a person is having the genetic disposition and is in an environment which will result in multiple sclerosis, the third important component is the fact that the person is exposed to some stress triggers. That stress may be in the form of physical injury, or it could be mental stress. This graphic shows the global distribution of multiple sclerosis. The color red has been used to show the areas which are predominantly susceptible to cases of multiple sclerosis, and you'll notice that they are mostly the northern latitudes which are shown in red. So there are large parts of the United States, Russia, and a lot of European countries. You'll notice, however, that the latitudes beyond a certain level, for instance, northern parts of Canada and Greenland, are shown in gray, which have virtually no multiple sclerosis at all. These happen to be the Inuit population of that area and the Eskimos, who for some reason are not susceptible to multiple sclerosis. Another interesting fact which has been found statistically is the fact that if a person has a first degree relative, then that person is 15 to 20 times more susceptible to multiple sclerosis. Another interesting fact is that a person, regardless of the ethnic background, if that person has spent the first 15 years of life between the 40th and the 60th parallel, or between the 40th and the 60th degree latitude, north or south, then the susceptibility is also high. Between the males and females, the distribution is 3 times more in women. So that is another point to be taken into consideration to understand the occurrence of multiple sclerosis. So let's take a look at what is multiple sclerosis. It is described as an unpredictable disorder with an unpredictable course. In other words, it is a disorder which has some commonalities but is highly individualized. This makes it more amenable to homeopathic cure, because the very foundation of homeopathic cure is individualizing. According to allopathy, there is no cure for this condition as yet. It's an inflammatory disease, and the inflammation occurs when the immune system attacks and damages nerve tissue. Immune system is basically our protective system, but when it turns against the body's parts or organs or tissues, then it is said to be a immune system attack on those organs, tissues or parts. The next important thing to note is that when the immunity cells or the immune cells attack, where exactly does the attack take place? It has been found that those immune cells happen to damage what is known as a myelin sheath of the axons. We'll take a look at what exactly those terms mean in the slides that follow. This damage of the myelin sheath of axons affects the communication within the brain and results in the symptoms which people report. To understand the process, let us first look at the most basic or fundamental part of the whole picture, which is the neuron. Now, a neuron is actually a nerve cell and it is an electrically excitable cell. It processes information and transmits information through electrical and chemical signals. So it's an electrochemical process. The transmission of the signal is electrical within the axon, and at the terminals of the axon, as we shall see in the diagram, it is chemical in nature. Those chemicals are known as neurotransmitters because they communicate information from one neuron to another. There are more than 84 billion neurons, and they do the job of our sensory and motor functions. Each neuron in turn is connected with as many as 10,000 other neurons. So you can see what a complex network the whole system of neurons is. Another point to remember is that every second each neuron is actually sending out as many as 5 to 50 electrical impulses of information. So that makes it a very busy network. Another point to be noted is that virtually all animals have this cell except for sponges and a few other animals. This graphic shows a nerve cell or a neuron. As we can see, like any other cell, it has a cell body inside which you have got cytoplasm and you have a nucleus. One feature along the border is an axon hillock from which protrudes the axon, which is the medium of transmission of the electrical impulses that we talked about earlier. This axon can have collaterals or branches, and they terminate in what is known as a terminal branch, which will be having these finger-like extensions, and at the end of which you have a synaptic knob. Now the synaptic knob interfaces with the next adjacent cell to which the information is to be transmitted or conveyed to a part of that cell known as a dendrite. So in essence, every neuron will be having a dendrite for receiving signals and the synaptic knob will be transmitting signals. When the electrical signal reaches the synaptic knob, it releases neurotransmitters, which we said were chemicals, which are picked up by the dendrite of the next cell to which this information is being conveyed. We'll now take a look at the axon and the myelin sheath that we talked about earlier. The axon, which is the nerve fiber along which the signal is transmitted, the electrical signal, is insulated or covered by a substance that is known as myelin. It's actually wrapped around it and is made up of a particular kind of cells, but it is not a continuous covering. It is in patches And in the middle of these patches, there is a space which is known as the nodes of Ranvier. They play a role in the way the signals are transmitted. As I mentioned earlier, it is not a simple analogy of electric current passing through a wire. What is actually happening is that these impulses jump across these gaps in a certain manner, which is known as a saltatory conduction. You'll have to consult some book on physiology or some websites which explain this beautifully, such as the Khan Academy. For the moment, we are only interested in knowing that the nerve fiber of the axon is coated with myelin, which is an insulation sheath, and there are gaps in between known as the nodes of Ranvier, which play a role in the transmission of the signal. Due to the attack of immune cells, when they reach this particular place, they scar the myelin and the body builds up the myelin again, and then there is scar tissue. So in the long run, the myelin sheath is damaged, and that has consequences which lead to multiple sclerosis, because what happens is that the damaged myelin sheath distorts the messages that are transmitted to the end of the axon where the synaptic action is taking place. That means the electrical signals are being converted to neurotransmitters. So that process is distorted, and that is leading to conditions and symptoms which are identified as multiple sclerosis. The effect of myelin damage is that the message which was earlier moving very quickly, as shown in this graphic, which is said to be around 400 kilometers per hour, is badly affected, and it drops to the pace of a snail, metaphorically speaking, to less than 4 kilometers per hour. So this is the effect. The effect of the damage is, of course, the condition known as multiple sclerosis. Once again, the etiology is not known, and in fact the whole process is poorly understood. What has been of importance to us as homeopaths is that this is a highly individualized disorder, which makes it possible for us to put our foot in the door and find a remedy based on the individualizing symptoms of the patient. Now, how exactly does it happen that the immune cells damage the lining of or the myelin sheath? What we know from anatomy and physiology is that the human brain is in fact well protected by what is known as a brain-blood barrier. The brain is actually a body within a body, and it is an organ which is completely sealed off from the rest of the body. In fact, even the nutrition and other substances which are required for its sustenance can take place only across a very special membrane of a very selective permeability, and that is known as the blood-brain barrier. So this barrier segregates the circulating blood from the interstitial fluid in the brain. In fact, you can consider the barrier to be an organ of its own. It is so specialized in its function. It restricts drug permeability, and that is why the allopaths and the pharmacologists are so interested in studying this, because they are not able to deliver drugs like antibiotics, etc., due to the sheer size of the molecules. To be noted, importantly, the fact that the blood-brain barrier is permeable to alcohol, and that has consequences for the health of a person. Here is an animation which shows that the blood-brain barrier is a specialized membrane which allows only certain types of molecules to pass through. This is a big subject, and there are various transporters that are coming into play for transporting these molecules, and it is best to refer to a good textbook or to watch some videos on places like the Khan Academy. There are many resources available on the internet. Now, this blood blood-brain barrier can break down, and it may allow certain unwanted particles to pass through, such as the immunity cells. And once these cells go past the blood-brain barrier, since they have not been exposed to the tissue over there, they consider that to be foreign or enemy, and they start eating up the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath is able to repair itself in the periods of remission, but that repair actually causes scar tissue. So that becomes a kind of a cumulative damage on the myelin sheath. The reasons or the times when this barrier can break down are during the developmental stages of infancy, or high level of hypertension, exposure to radiation, including microwave radiation, and importantly, stress. Any kind of stress can trigger conditions which are suited for this barrier to break down. Also, there can be physical trauma or injury which can cause this kind of condition, which allows these immunity cells to pass through the blood-brain barrier. To summarize, we took a look at the etiology or the causative factors, principally which are genetics, environment, and stress. There is little that a person can do about genetic makeup. Environment is a contributory factor which may be partially controlled, but once again it is geographic in nature and a person may have very few choices. However, the triggers, importantly stress, can be controlled, which we shall see in later videos during this particular module. We also saw the pathophysiology as to how the myelin sheaths are damaged despite the fact that the blood-brain barrier is equipped to prevent any such harmful particles to go across. But once again, the blood-brain barrier can break down under certain conditions like injury, radiation, stress, and factors like infections during infancy. So thank you very much for your attention, and see you in the next video. So till then, bye bye, and please participate on the forums. That's very important for the other students also to learn from your experience, which you'll be contributing on the forum. So thank you and bye bye.